David Sherman was a U.S. Marine, and Dan Cragg served as a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. Together, they have co-written 17 novels in the Star Fist series, which are military science fiction. It shouldn't come as a surprise, then, that their sole Star Wars novel, Jedi Trial, is also hugely military science fiction. As we will see in this review, your mileage may vary whether that's something you're interested in or not. When I first started rereading Jedi Trial, I didn't remember any of it, but then I got to a certain scene and I remembered, lo, those many years ago in 2004, me getting to that exact same scene and going, no, and putting the book down. I did read this, I'm just not sure whether I ever actually finished it. So, a brief summary. The Separatists have taken control of Praesetlin, a crucial communications hub for the Republic. The Jedi have in turn dispatched Corellian Jedi Master Nejaa Halcyon, as well as Anakin Skywalker under his command, to join forces with an independent fighting force there that has prior history with Halcyon. If Anakin returns from this battle triumphant, he will become a Jedi Knight, but he faces many temptations along the way. Jedi Trial was promoted as the book in which Anakin Skywalker becomes a Jedi Knight 30 months into the Clone Wars conflict. If you've watched the later 3D animated Clone Wars TV show, you know that this timeline got rejiggered a bit, in that in the 3D Clone Wars, Anakin becomes a Jedi Knight very soon after the Battle of Geonosis and takes an apprentice, so perhaps giving him a little more justification in Revenge of the Sith when he gets mad that he's not made a master. Still doesn't really make any sense, but makes a little bit more sense. Here, though, Anakin becomes a Jedi Knight a mere 6 months before Revenge of the Sith. And so Jedi Trial is meant to show us the ordeal he went through in becoming knighted. In truth, though, Anakin isn't really in a huge chunk of this story. We meet him in the prologue, where Obi-Wan is leaving for a mission and he's being left behind. He then becomes friendly with Nejaa Halcyon because they're both stuck on Coruscant at the same time. When Halcyon is given command of this force to go rescue the communications hub on Praesetlin, he names Anakin as his second in command. But then even there, Anakin and Halcyon don't arrive on Praesetlin until chapter 16, more than halfway through the story. So you may be wondering, okay, if the Jedi aren't really there for a lot of the story, then what's going on? And the answer is yes, this battle of Praesetlin before the Jedi reinforcements arrive. So we have the people in the communications hub like Reija Momen who are captured by the Separatists. We have the local Praesetlin forces like Odie, Subu, the recon trooper, and Erk Harmon, the pilot. And they're commanding officers, and everything goes wrong. And then that independent fighting force led by Zozridor Slayke are nearby, and they come in, and they're basically having a standoff with the Separatist forces until the reinforcements from Coruscant arrive. And that is a lot of the story. And then Odie and Erk Starfighter is shot down, and that's how he meets Odie, who's like maybe the sole survivor from her recon troop, and they're just like moving through the desert, and they get picked up, and then they get trapped, and then they get out. And so there is an awful lot with Erk and Odie here. I didn't find their story particularly moving. I thought their romance was very out of place and rushed and not fitting with the rest of the story. But I guess that they are our normal men on the ground here. Of the people in the communications hub, the only one we really get to know at all, and even that is very fleetingly, is Reija Momen. And all we know about her is that she's a matronly figure. Everyone views her as a mother figure. We don't see any examples of her being a motherly figure to her crew under her. It felt sort of insulting, to be honest, that this female character solely exists to eventually remind Anakin of his own mother so that when she tragically dies, he can get mad and lash out at the Separatist forces. Slayke, too, is depicted as this great guy, like even Halcyon, who has beef with him, is like, you're a great man, Slayke, and everyone likes him, and what a good leader. But at the same time, I did feel like the setup we were given for what he did, that he didn't think the Republic was fighting hard enough against the Separatists, so he ran off with his ship, built up this pirate force, was supposed to be arrested and brought to Coruscant for justice, but after he stole Halcyon's ship, he ended up being pardoned, and now he's like a mercenary. So he got mad that things weren't going his own way, and he ran off and he stole equipment, and but he's a good guy, he's a great leader, he gives many, inspiring speeches, and after the third one, I was a little I've had enough, please, Slayke, do not give any more of these. And I liked some of what we saw of Anakin. I liked Anakin really digging into his role as the leader of his troops, wanting to learn everything he could about it. Although I did feel at the same time this is 2.5 years into the Clone Wars. I would have thought that maybe he would have been given opportunities like this earlier, although it's probably a consequence of wanting to keep him somewhat out of the stories until Revenge of the Sith happened, because the authors didn't want to contradict anything that would happen in episode 3. So I guess I enjoyed seeing Anakin growing in his leadership skills, but I also felt like that probably should have been something that happened earlier on in the Clone Wars. But too, I felt like the conclusion with Anakin was basically just more unsubtle setup for Revenge of the Sith, that this matronly woman is killed before him and reminds him of the death of his mother, and he starts attacking all the Separatist troops, and clearly Palpatine/Sidious had a plan for this battle, but when we get to the end, it seems like his plan was just yes, that Anakin, I think I can do something with him, rather than Palpatine has been manipulating events all along to get Anakin where he wants to be, and I don't understand having this whole attack on Pre-Setlin only to make Anakin mad about dead motherly ladies. And Nejaa Halcyon is here. As we learned in the earlier books in the 90s, this is the grandfather of Corran Horn, who became a Jedi once Luke restarted the Jedi Order. Except, I would say that you could have replaced Nejaa here with any other character, and it wouldn't have mattered. I have the feeling that someone at Del Rey or Lucasfilm told Sherman and Cragg, hey, why don't you pair Anakin up with Nejaa Halcyon, because they were both secretly married and Nejaa had a son and they can connect over things. But this just doesn't play out in a natural way at all. Nejaa and Anakin encounter each other in the Jedi Temple, they spar together, and there are lots of instances of this in the book where we just are told things and we're never shown them. But here, they slowly become friends, but we don't ever see their friendly interactions. We're just told it happens, that they spar all the time and then they have lunch together. And Nejaa's on the out and out with the Jedi Order because he was supposed to capture Zozridor Slayke, but instead Slayke stole his ship. And halfway through the story, as they're heading to Pre-Setlin, and they've both been writing letters to their wives, and then Halcyon seeks Anakin out, and out of nowhere, he just tells Anakin, I'm married, I have a son named Valid. And Anakin's like, oh. And then Anakin's like, I'm married too, her name is Padme. And again, we don't actually see this conversation, it's just told in narration, Halcyon told Anakin about his family. And this was the point where I remembered reading this book those many years ago, reaching this point and just putting the book down, because this was just the weirdest conversation, and I could never see this playing out in real life like that. If they're truly friends, I still don't see Nejaa just, like, out of the blue coming up to Anakin and telling him this, and Anakin being like, oh, me too, buddy. Maybe if it was the other way around, like, maybe Nejaa saw something that Anakin had done, you know, maybe Anakin sent her for Padme or something like that, and he was like, are you married? And Anakin could be like, no. And then, like, maybe they could talk about it. And in a natural conversation, this should come out. But it really seemed like someone thought, oh, well, we know these two characters are secretly married, even though the Jedi don't approve of it. So let's smash them together in a book and they'll talk about it. But, like, the conversation is so unnatural and doesn't work at all. And, like, I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. And, you know, maybe him being married was because he was a Corellian Jedi. He didn't spend a lot of time on Coruscant. They're a very insular Jedi community that stay on Corellia. And so, I don't even know if him having a family would have had the same level of disobeying the Jedi Order as Anakin would, because he had a different Jedi training and upbringing, but you don't get any sense of that here. He's just like generic Jedi guy. You get no sense of his other connections. He talks about he really likes Obi-Wan, like Obi-Wan's a great guy, but I don't get any sense that there is any sort of relationship between Nejaa and Obi-Wan, even though we know from iJedi that they went on this mission together to the Jensari that led to Halcyon's death. And Halcyon is the Jedi leading this, but, like, he doesn't seem like a very good commander. He sends out recon troops. The one who finds out where the actual weaknesses are dies, and the other one comes back and goes, they're weak here, but, like, they throw all their people against it, and they have to retreat. And so it's just like, why is he here other than to talk to Anakin? Because he doesn't seem that good of a commander. And he doesn't seem to tie into any of the previous information we had about him either. Like, ah! And while the cover has Asajj Ventress making you think she's the bad guy here, this is just like the Cestus Deception, where they put Dooku on the cover and then he, like, never appeared in the story. Asajj appears a few times talking to the actual leader, who is a member of the banking clan, the Moon, Pors Tonith. And Pors Tonith, as a villain, the one that just sits there and doesn't get his hands dirty, and he's constantly drinking tea that turns his teeth purple, and he thinks very highly of himself, but he's, like, dumb. I don't know. I would have rather Ventress was here, because at least Ventress would have brought some excitement into it. And again, like, I'm not sure what the Separatist plot is here, because they take the communications hub and then they're captured and the Republic gets it back. If it was to redirect attention from somewhere else, we don't get any sense of that. Again, it just seems like Palpatine's plan was to make Anakin angry and see what happens, but, like, the plan to use Reija Momen as a hostage was Pors Tonith. So, like, I can see why you would attack a very important communications hub, but I'm not sure how this fits into Palpatine and Dooku's larger game plan here. So before I get into the issues, I will just say it was nice to see a little bit of the EU cameos here. Like, we have Armand Isard appearing as a Republic intelligence leader talking with Palpatine. We have Nejaa Halcyon, even if he could have been replaced with any other Jedi and you wouldn't have noticed. We have, like, a member of the Tarkin family who's a senator. Like, okay, that's interesting. But I did feel like there were some weird bits here that didn't fit with continuity for especially previous expanded universe stuff. So we have the Separatists taking Presetlin, and it seems to be like Sluice Van is allied with the Republic. But back in between episode 2 and episode 3, on the Star Wars website, they had these HoloNet issues, which were basically like in-universe articles released on the HoloNet to say what's going on with the Clone Wars. And I remember one of them being that Sluice Van had allied themselves with the Separatists. And, like, Presetland is right next to Sluice Van, so this seems like a bad place to put your very important communications hub. We also have the Separatists using cloaked ships, and again, this was something that I didn't think they had at this point in time. A key plot device in the Thrawn trilogy, which is set 5 years after the Battle of Endor, is that Thrawn got his hands on cloaking devices, and he was using these for his schemes. But here, it's like the ships that try to board Halcyon's command ship are cloaked, and then the reinforcement fleet from the Separatists that enter the system are all cloaked. I did not think that was something they had at that point in time, but I may be wrong. One of my big issues with the Jedi Trial was just, this is straight up military sci-fi. For a lot of bits of it, it doesn't even feel like Star Wars military sci-fi. For the scenes with Odie and Erk and Slayke and stuff, like, this is just generic military stuff. Which is what Sherman and Cragg write. It just didn't feel Star Wars enough to me. And also it didn't feel interesting, I think, because it was hard to follow some of the battle scenes. Sometimes we would get something and then the next chapter would be going back and showing us that again or showing us earlier things. And I just found it hard to visualize where all of these lines were and like what they were doing, and especially with Odie and Erk, which are an issue in and of themselves. It didn't feel like what was happening was important to the story and just padding for length, which I never enjoy reading. If this does not feel integral or feeling like it's leading to something, then I'm gonna get bored. I think too, so much of it is logistics and we can only hold out for another 7 days because we need 2 tons of blah blah blah, but we can only get 1 tons in. We're losing too many shuttles. It's just like, I don't care about that. I mean, I think that's maybe why I'm not familiar with Sherman and Cragg's other works, besides the fact that I looked at them and it looks like they're just space marines and they're all guys and like, oh gosh, that does not sound interesting to me at all. And Odie and Erk. Number one, Odie is a terrible name, a horrible name. Erk is not good either, but Odie makes me think of the dog from Garfield. So like, why would you do that to her? Why would you give her that name? Odie is portrayed as a really great recon trooper, but she doesn't get very many opportunities to show her skills because she's either wandering around in a state of dehydration with Erk, or she's follows him around because she says, I'm his wingmate now, I'm his wingmate. And so they do things like staff a big heavy repeating blaster, and then they need to retreat, and he's such an idiot he won't, and they get trapped, and then they cut their way out with a vibro knife. Like, what? And then she accidentally shoots someone, and then they're all calling her killer, and they're like, it's a joke. And I'm like, dude, don't do that. If she accidentally killed someone in friendly fire, like, that's traumatic. And she has like one chapter to be upset about it, and she gets over it, and then she's just like still following Erk around. And she goes back after Anakin, and then she and Erk, despite knowing each other for like 7 days at this point, are like, we want to get married, and Anakin, can you officiate the ceremony? And I'm like, wait, what? So, in short, Jedi Trial is ostensibly the story of how Anakin Skywalker became a Jedi Knight. But in truth, Anakin isn't a significant part of it until at least the halfway point. And instead, we have to follow characters like Odie and Erk and Zozridor Slayke and battle scenes that I found confusing. If you like military sci-fi, you may like Jedi Trial better than I did, but I absolutely do not like those kind of stories, and that's what the majority of this is. I also felt like there were times where Sherman and Cragg had interesting ideas, but the execution of them just completely fell apart. And yes, the pinnacle of that, the epitome of that, was the conversation between Nejaa Halcyon and Anakin Skywalker about how they're both married. It was just garbage. So next time, fortunately, I'm going to be reading what may be my favorite book of all the Clone Wars stories. Yoda, Dark Rendezvous by Sean Stewart.